never thought I'd be that woman. You know the one. The one who settles. The one who trades fireworks for a sensible furnace because she's just tired. Tired of the games, the drama, the gut-wrenching uncertainty. But here I am, sitting in my perfectly adequate craftsman house in a leafy suburb of Portland, Oregon, staring at a wall I painted grayish because it was calming. I married the human equivalent of that wall. I'm Eliza, I'm 32, and this is the story of how I destroyed my marriage to Arthur because I was looking for a man who didn't exist. Don't get me wrong, Arthur isn't a bad person. He's just Arthur. When we met at my friend Chloe's housewarming, he was the tall, slightly stooped guy in a button-down shirt who spent 20 minutes rearranging the charcuterie board. Not for looks. For, and I quote, optimizing traffic flow and cheese to cracker accessibility. That should have been my first sign. He's a logistics manager for a massive shipping company. And my God, does it show. Everything in his life has a system, an order, a clearly defined process. He asked for my number by saying he'd like to schedule a preliminary social engagement to assess mutual compatibility. I actually thought it was cute back then. Hilarious, even. A quirky antidote to the man who came before him. Julian. Julian was a custom furniture maker, a sculptor of wood and metal who could walk into a silent room and make it feel like a party. He was all raw energy and impulsive decisions. He smelled of sawdust and whiskey and had a laugh that could make you forget your own name. He was also a black hole of reliability. He'd disappear for 3 days on a creative bender and flirt with anything that cast a shadow. After a year of that exhilarating, soul-shredding chaos, Arthur seemed like a lighthouse in a storm. Arthur texted back within 3 minutes. Always. He showed up exactly when he said he would. He looked at me like I was a complex problem he was genuinely delighted to solve. Our first date was at a small bistro downtown. He'd arrived early, of course. He'd already selected a table, not by the window, not in a cozy corner, but the one he'd determined had the optimal acoustics for uninterrupted conversation. I'm not joking. He said that. He then pulled 3 small index cards from his jacket pocket. Just some conversation starters, he said, with a nervous little smile. In case we hit a lull. Looking back, I should have run. I should have sprinted out of that acoustically optimal bistro and never looked back. But I was 29. The biological clock wasn't just ticking. It was a cathedral bell in my ears. All my friends were getting married, having babies, talking about mortgage rates. And here was this kind, stable man who used index cards because he was afraid of disappointing me. So I stayed. And I told myself this was what growing up felt like. The thing about Arthur is that he is as dependable as a sunrise. He's a Volvo station wagon. He's store-brand oatmeal. He remembers the anniversary of our first date, plans for birthdays 3 months in advance, and actually listens when I talk, often taking mental notes he'll bring up weeks later. But he also organizes our pantry by nutritional content and expiration date. He gets a twitch in his eye if we deviate from the weekly meal plan. During our entire courtship, nearly 2 years of it, he never once just grabbed me, never pushed me against a wall and kissed me like he couldn't breathe without it. Every act of intimacy felt scheduled, discussed, mutually agreed upon. Would you be amenable to becoming more physically familiar now? He asked once, on our sofa. It was the most passion-killing sentence I had ever heard. When he proposed, it was right on schedule according to his relationship progression timeline. I only know this because he showed it to me. He'd set up a picnic at the Portland Japanese Garden. It was lovely. And then he pulled out his laptop. Eliza, he began, opening a PowerPoint presentation. I've compiled some data points supporting the high probability of a successful long-term partnership between us. There were slides. Slides with Venn diagrams of our shared interests, bar graphs of our personality compatibility scores, and a projected 5-year financial plan. I'm not even joking. Chloe and my other friends thought it was the most adorable, so Arthur thing ever. The ring was a modest, simple diamond. He'd picked it, he explained, because it had the best clarity to cost ratio he could find within a pre-approved budget. I smiled. I said yes, because what else was I supposed to do? I was almost 31. Arthur was stable, employed, kind, and he actually wanted to commit. He was the sensible choice, the adult choice. During our engagement, the little things started to feel like big things, like how he'd practice difficult conversations with my dad in the mirror before actually having them, or how he spent an entire weekend researching the optimal humidity levels for storing our wedding wine. Who does that? The wedding was exactly what you'd expect. Small, practical, budget conscious. Lucas had a spreadsheet for that too, with statistics on how wedding debt correlates with early divorce. He cried during his vows, big silent tears rolling down his cheeks. It should have been sweet, but all I could think was that Julian would have just winked at me, a silent, reckless promise that would have made my knees go weak. My friends kept telling me how lucky I was. He's so thoughtful, they'd say. He really thinks everything through. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Another way is that he has all the spontaneity of a tax audit. Our honeymoon in Italy had a laminated itinerary. It had buffer time built in for unforeseen delays or spontaneous activities. He had literally scheduled spontaneity. I kept telling myself it would get better, that marriage would change him, that one day, this deep well of masculine confidence I saw in other men would magically spring forth from Arthur, that he'd come home from work, see me in the kitchen, and just take me, without first asking if it would disrupt our dinner schedule. But it never happened. The messed up part? Arthur really tried. He genuinely wanted to make me happy. When I mentioned once that I missed dancing, he spent 2 weeks secretly taking online salsa lessons. He surprised me with a date night to a local salsa club. It was sweet, in theory, but watching him count the steps under his breath, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and apologize every single time his foot was an inch off, it just made me want to scream. It wasn't passion. It was another problem to be solved, another system to be perfected. I was living in a cage I had willingly walked into. A comfortable, well-maintained, acoustically optimal cage, and I was starting to look for a way out. The first real crack appeared at our friend Mark's 40th birthday. It wasn't a party, it was a project. Building a new deck in his backyard. All the husbands were there, in that performative, masculine way they get around power tools. Arthur, of course, arrived with a toolbox that looked like it belonged in a surgical suite. He had laser levels, digital angle finders, and a printout of the deck schematics he'd reviewed the night before. While Mark and the other guys were just grabbing boards and getting to it, Arthur was hovering, muttering about load-bearing joints and optimal screw placement. Mark finally clapped him on the shoulder, a little too hard. "Artie, buddy, it's a deck, not a space shuttle. Just grab a drill and help us out." Arthur just gave that tight, nervous smile and stepped back. He spent the next hour supervising for safety compliance. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. The other wives were giving me these looks. Not mean looks, pity looks, which is so much worse. Then came the new hobby. He came home one day, all excited. His therapist, of course he had a therapist, with weekly scheduled appointments suggested he find a non-logical, creative outlet for stress. Apparently, he'd been passed over for a promotion. The feedback was that he lacked assertive leadership qualities. The guy who got the job was a total bulldog, but he got things done. So, Arthur's new hobby? Kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. He'd buy chipped bowls and shattered vases from thrift stores and spend hours in the garage, painstakingly gluing the pieces back together, tracing the cracks with gold lacquer. The philosophy is about embracing imperfection, he explained, holding up a mended cup, finding beauty in the brokenness. All I saw was a man spending his weekend fixing someone else's garbage instead of boxing, or hiking a mountain, or doing literally anything that didn't involve tweezers and glue. Meanwhile, Julian, yeah, I still checked his social media, was posting photos of himself, sweaty and covered in sawdust, standing in front of these massive, gorgeous tables he'd built with his own 2 hands. It wasn't fair. I started spending more and more time with Chloe, venting over wine. She'd listen, but I could tell she didn't really get it. "At least he's not out at bars every night, Eli," she'd say. "At least he helps around the house." He didn't just help. He had a chore chart. For himself, with stickers. A grown man with a sticker chart for taking out the recycling. The worse I felt, the harder he tried. He started leaving little notes with terrible puns around the house. He'd buy me flowers, but only after researching which species had the longest vase life. He wanted to talk about his feelings. Constantly. Who raised this man? I started lashing out. When we watched a movie and he got misty-eyed, I'd snap, "God, Arthur, real men don't cry at cartoons." When he'd ask me for the 10th time what I wanted for dinner, I'd yell, "Just make a decision for once in your life." He'd just get this wounded look on his face, that soft, confused expression, and say he just valued my input. Then I ran into Julian at an art supply store. I was there picking up something for a work project. Arthur was there too, in a different aisle, meticulously comparing the tensile strength of different types of epoxy for his broken pottery. He had a measuring tape in his hand, and then I heard that laugh. That familiar, reckless laugh. Julian was there, buying a huge slab of walnut wood. He looked incredible. Worn leather jacket, messy hair, a smudge of grease on his cheek. The contrast was a physical blow. He saw me, and his eyes lit up in that way that always made me feel like I was the only person in the world. "Eliza," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Look at you. We talked for 5 minutes." It felt more alive than the last 5 months with Arthur. He gave me this knowing look, a look that said he understood everything I wasn't saying. When I walked away, my stomach was in knots. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You looked like you needed a rescue, Jay." I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. I texted him back. Our first secret coffee felt like coming up for air. The first secret kiss, in the front seat of his beat-up truck, felt like a lightning strike. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but it was the first thing I had felt truly, deeply felt in years. I told myself it was just this, just a release, a way to cope. I told myself it wasn't real, but it was, and it was about to burn everything to the ground. The dinner party was Arthur's idea, of course, a way to reconnect with our core social group. He spent a week planning it. There was a menu with wine pairings, a guest list cross-referenced for conversational chemistry, and a new set of linen napkins he'd ironed himself. I'd been day drinking with Chloe, fortifying myself for the evening. I was buzzing with cheap rosé and the lingering guilt and thrill of a text message from Julian that was still glowing in my pocket. Everything was going fine, I guess, in that stiff, overly polite Arthur way, until our neighbor, Dave, started complaining about some new efficiency protocols at his construction firm. Dave is one of those guys. Loud, opinionated, thinks he's the smartest guy in every room. "It's just more red tape," Dave boomed, sloshing his wine. "Making everything slower. Sometimes you just gotta get the job done, you know?" Arthur, ever the diplomat, couldn't help himself. He cleared his throat. "Well, statistically, Dave, companies that implement these kinds of protocols see a 30% reduction in workplace accidents and a 15% increase in long-term productivity." He used his soft, reasonable voice, the one he uses when he's trying to be assertive but is terrified of actual conflict. Dave just laughed in his face. "Statistics. Buddy, I'm in the real world. You can't build a house with a spreadsheet." He cut Arthur off, turning to someone else. And Arthur, my husband, just deflated. He gave a tiny, nervous laugh and said, "Well, everyone's entitled to their perspective." Then he stood up to clear the appetizer plates, like a caterer at his own party. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the text from Julian burning a hole in my consciousness. Maybe it was years of watching him fold like a cheap suit every time he was challenged. But something inside me just snapped. "This," I heard myself say, my voice slicing through the chatter. The room went quiet. "This right here. This is exactly why I married you." You could have heard a pin drop. Arthur froze, the cheese plate in his hand. He had that stupid, surprised puppy expression on his face, the one he gets when something doesn't go according to his precious plan. "Because all the real men were taken," I finished. I should have stopped. God, I should have stopped. But the dam had broken. "You want to know what real men do, Arthur? They don't research the perfect wine pairing for lasagna for an hour. They don't make spreadsheets for date night ideas. They sure as hell don't cry at their own wedding vows." I was on my feet now, my voice shaking with a rage that felt ancient. "They don't let people like Dave walk all over them. They stand up for themselves." He just stood there, taking it, which made me even angrier. "You want to know what's worse than a husband who color codes the spice rack? A husband who doesn't even defend himself when his wife is eviscerating him in front of everyone." He started gathering empty glasses, his hands trembling slightly. Tidying. He was trying to tidy up the emotional carnage. "You want to know something else?" My voice dropped, low and venomous. "I've been seeing Julian again." "Effing." The gasp from Chloe was audible. "Yeah, Julian. Nothing physical." I lied. "But at least he knows how to take charge. At least he doesn't need a self-help book to teach him how to be a man." Arthur finally stopped cleaning. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a pain so deep it should have stopped my heart. Then he looked at our mortified guests. "I think," he said, his voice infuriatingly calm, Maybe we should continue this conversation in private. Private? Now you want privacy? Where was that backbone 5 minutes ago when your boss passed you over for being too nice? Someone, I think it was Mark, started to say they should leave. Arthur, ever the perfect host, started apologizing to them. I'm so sorry, everyone. We'll reschedule. Reschedule? I shrieked with laughter. Like this is just a meeting that ran over? I looked him dead in the eye. You know what Julian said when I told him about your kintsugi hobby? He laughed. He actually laughed. Because real men build things, Arthur. They don't play with glue and broken pottery. The room emptied out pretty quickly after that. He just stood there, in the wreckage of our dining room, surrounded by half-empty glasses and his perfectly arranged cheese plate. For the first time, he looked completely lost. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't suggest we talk about our feelings. He just went upstairs. I followed him, demanding to know what he was doing. He was packing a bag, folding his shirts with military precision. Even now. So you're running away, I spat. Real brave. He paused. He actually looked me in the eye, and for the first time, there was no softness there. Only a cold, hard finality. No, Eliza, he said, his voice quiet but steady. I'm setting a boundary. Something I should have done a long, long time ago. I figured he'd be back in a few days. That was Arthur's pattern. Retreat, analyze, and return with a plan to fix things. A chart, a list, a carefully worded conversation. But days turned into a week. Then 2. The only communication was a single text message. I'm at my brother's. We'll be in touch about dividing our assets. Dividing our assets. Like we were a failed business venture. Actually, that's exactly what our marriage was to him, wasn't it? Just another project to be managed. I called, but he didn't answer. He'd only reply with polite, formal texts about practical arrangements. When I drove to his brother's house, ready for a fight, ready to have it out, he wasn't there. His brother's wife told me. He'd joined a gym, not some Planet Fitness, a serious, gritty weightlifting gym. Chloe, finally taking pity on me, filled in the rest over a tense coffee. Arthur was in therapy. By himself, he'd taken a different position at work, a lateral move to project management. Something about crisis logistics where his obsessive attention to detail was not a quirk, but a superpower. And the kintsugi? He'd started selling his pieces online, and people were buying them. Successfully. He's doing better, Eliza, Chloe told me, not meeting my eye. Maybe you should try therapy too. I tried to explain my side to our friends, carefully editing out the affair, the sheer venom of my words. But they'd been there. They had seen it. Even Chloe, my best friend, just shook her head. You know what your problem is? She said, her voice gentle but firm. You confused kindness with weakness. Arthur was never weak. He just didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone, until you made him feel like he had to. Julian reached out when he heard we'd separated. He wanted to get drinks, catch up. I agreed, a bitter part of me thinking, see? I was right. This is what I was missing. It was awful. He spent the entire time bragging about his latest conquests, checking out the waitress so obviously it was embarrassing, and complaining about his ex-wife. He was a caricature of the rugged man I thought I wanted. When he leaned in to kiss me in the parking lot, all I could smell was stale beer. I realized, with a sickening lurch, how wrong I'd been. The real gut punch came from Arthur's brother's Instagram. He posted a video of Arthur at some rock climbing gym. He looked different. Not just physically, though he was leaner, more defined. It was how he carried himself. He moved with a quiet confidence. He wasn't checking his phone for proper climbing techniques. He was just doing it. I stalked his new kintsugi business page. The old Arthur would have posted about productivity and process. This Arthur posted photos of his art. He even posted about a piece that had failed, that had shattered again during repair, writing about how failure was part of the process. The old Arthur would never have admitted failure so publicly. He was becoming someone new, someone I didn't recognize. When we finally met at a neutral coffee shop to discuss the divorce papers, I almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't wearing one of his perfectly pressed, color-coordinated outfits. Just jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that fit him better than his old clothes ever had. He'd grown a beard, not a perfectly manicured one. Just a beard. He seemed comfortable in his own skin for the first time. We could try counseling, I heard myself say. sounding exactly like the overthinking, planning person I used to mock him for being. He just smiled. A real smile, not that nervous twitch he used to have. "I loved you, Eliza," he said, his voice even. "But I didn't love who I became trying to be the man you wanted. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." That conversation broke me more than the divorce itself. Here I was, rattling around our perfect house with its color-coded closets, while he was out there becoming someone real, just not the kind of real I had demanded. I found myself missing the stupid things, the terrible puns on post-it notes, the way he'd research restaurants for hours to find the perfect date night spot, even the damn chore chart. At least he had cared enough to try. Then I saw them, at the farmer's market. I was there to buy some overpriced heirloom tomatoes, and there he was, Arthur, and a woman with short, pixie-like hair and paint-stained fingers. Nina. That was her name. A textile artist, according to her Instagram. Yes, I looked her up. Don't judge me. She was showing him different types of natural dyes, and he was laughing. Not his old, nervous laugh. A real, deep belly laugh. He looked relaxed. His beard was a little messy. He looked happy. The worst part? When he spotted me, he didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty or awkward. He just gave me a calm, simple nod. "Hey, Eliza," and turned back to her, resting his hand on the small of her back. It wasn't a calculated gesture. It was just natural. Just being. I saw them again at Chloe's wedding. I knew they'd be there, but I wasn't prepared for how it would feel. Arthur was a groomsman, looking sharp in his suit, but relaxed. During the reception, he gave a toast. I braced myself for the index cards. Instead, he stood up, no notes, and spoke from the heart. About friendship and growth, and about how true love isn't about finding a perfect person, but about creating a safe space for an imperfect person to be themselves. People laughed at his jokes. Real laughter. Nina watched him with this proud, quiet smile, not a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. Later, I was dancing with one of the other groomsmen, Brent. Tall, muscular, oozing a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Exactly the type I used to wish Arthur would be. He spent the whole time telling me about his CrossFit stats and how most women can't handle a true alpha. I caught Arthur's eye across the dance floor while Brent was mid-brag about his deadlift record. For a split second, we shared a look. A look of such profound, mutual understanding of the absurdity of it all that I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Later, I overheard them by the dessert table. Nina was teasing him because he had, without realizing it, started organizing the cupcakes by color gradient. The old Arthur would have gotten defensive or apologized profusely. This Arthur just pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, and said, "You love my beautiful repairs." And she did. She genuinely did. That's when it hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had spent our entire marriage trying to chisel Arthur into my flawed idea of a man. But he wasn't a block of marble. He was a person. The attention to detail I mocked, he turned it into art. The sensitivity I thought was weakness, it made him emotionally intelligent enough to heal himself. The carefulness I mistook for cowardice, it was just thoughtfulness. You know what the worst part is? Arthur didn't find a better woman. He became a better man. And I stayed exactly the same. Still judging, still comparing, still fundamentally misunderstanding that being a real man has nothing to do with aggression or dominance or never showing your hurt. All those things I used to hate about him, they were never the problem. Now I get to watch him be happy with someone who appreciates all the beautiful, broken pieces I was too shallow to value. While I'm here, dancing with guys like Brent, and finally understanding what I threw away. I used to tell everyone I married Arthur because a real man wasn't available. Turns out, I had a real man all along. I was just too busy looking for a stereotype to notice.